Hi, Boosh here with a full visual guide for the new Zeromus Extreme. Before we get started, we'll want to assign a couple of things. Firstly, we will want DPS to pair up with non-DPS, and for those pairs to take a corner each. We will also want a left to right line prio for non-DPS and DPS. So non-DPS we have main tank leftmost and then off tank H1, H2. For DPS we have M1 leftmost and then M2, R1, R2. The first mechanic we'll encounter is Abyssal Nox. This drops a dark AoE puddle on the group that will reduce everybody's HP to 1 and give them a Doom debuff. This Doom debuff is cleansed by healing a player to full. It is worth noting that tanks have more health and so will need more healing. Given this, tanks should utilise their own personal toolkit to help healers out, and healers may also want to do some spot healing. Useful tools for helping your healers out are Nascent Flash, Heart of Grundom, and in an emergency, Clemency can really save your healer's skin if they just died and they don't have tools up that they otherwise would have. With regard to healer toolkit, most of it is as useful as it normally is for healing stuff. An exception is Macrocosmos, which is very good in this spot because the life that you lose from being reduced to 1 HP counts for the Macrocosmos damage that is stored. So as you're clearing up these Doom debuffs, some white lines will appear. You will want to move away from the spots where the first set of white lines show up, because these will explode, and whilst they're exploding, a second set of lines will show up. So after the first explosion, move away from the second set of explosions. Following this will be Sable Thread, which is a multi-hit line stack mechanic with Wild Charge, which means the two frontmost players take more damage. So we have tanks stand right at the front and pop a little bit of mid. Shortly after this, tanks will be targeted with Dark Matter, which is a 3-hit tank buster that has a large AoE around each hit. So move away from the group as a tank and pop some mid. Next up, we have Visceral Whirl. Here the boss will cleave the arena, leaving a safe spot in the front and a safe spot in the back. So here, the safe spot in the front is the front right safe spot. Following this, some stars will drop on the arena and they will explode in an X pattern. So we have to identify where the safe spot is for these exploding stars. Now, the good news is the safe spots for these stars are always in the opposite corner to where the first safe spot was. So the first safe spot was front right, which means the viable safe spots have to be on the front left. So we can position ourselves in the front left and look in. And then what we're doing is we're checking lanes, if you like, and we're seeing which lane is empty and which lane has stars on it. So this top lane has 2 stars in it, no good. Middle lane has a star on it, that's going to cleave. So this empty lane at the bottom means that our safe spot is on the side left. So we move to the side left, they explode in this pattern, and we don't get hit. Now, there are 6 possible safe spots, each with a unique pattern. Some people may find memorizing the patterns easier, so in the description I've included a quick infographic for each of the patterns and their corresponding safe spots. I've also linked the more detailed guide I have done of this mechanic previously. Next up we have Flare, which is 2 light party stack towers. So we're going to have tanks and melee go to the front and healers in range go to the back. After the stack damage goes off, move out of the tower because it will turn into a fireball, and if you linger too long you will get hurt and get a vulnerability. From these fireballs there are little orange lines pointing out. These are to indicate line AoEs that are going to expand and shoot out shortly, and they hit for about the width of the ball. So eyeball where those are pointing and don't stand there. So here we can see there's safe spots on each of the sides and in the middle. There are different patterns, the middle is not always safe. Next up we have Void Bio, which is fairly simple. It's a series of orbs that appear along the front of the arena and at different timings come out. This is always combined with Visceral Whirl, so just dodge the orbs and stand in the safe spots. It is worth noting that if you get hit by an orb, you can heal through it, it's just very painful to do. Finally for phase 1 we have Big Bang. This has each player with a spread AoE and a bunch of puddles drop on the ground. So what we're trying to do here is spread roughly in our corners, with the acknowledgement that that is not always possible because sometimes puddles block you off. The reason why we try to aim for our corners is to avoid situations where 5 players all dodge in the same direction and there's either not enough space or not enough time for them to spread properly. Following these spread AoEs, there will be a big raid wide once the cast bar finishes. After the Big Bang raid wide, the arena will change and everybody will get a collection of debuffs. Now everybody gets max HP reduced and a dot, so make sure you heal people after the raid wide because otherwise they can bleed out accidentally. Everybody also gets a stored spread AoE and a stored acceleration bomb, which is a stillness mechanic. One of the healers will also get a stack that is stored for later, and 2 of the DPS will get a forked lightning that is stored for the same time as the stack AoE. So these are the only unique debuffs that you actually need to keep an eye out for. The first mechanic of this new phase is Void Meteor. This basically involves a bunch of meteors being on the ground and then the role groups in turn having to place a meteor without touching other meteors, whilst also stretching a tether far enough so that they don't die to the meteor they're going to drop. So there are 2 tether spawn points on the southern part of the arena next to the southernmost meteor, one on the east, one on the west. And then by default there are 12 meteors that always drop as shown, which means there are 6 safe channels to drop the initial set of meteors. Where this mechanic gets additional complexity is there are 2 blocker meteors that drop randomly in any of these 6 spots. So if we take an example, there is one on the mid left and one on the far right. These are going to block the channels nearest to them, so we discount those channels and that leaves us with 4 safe channels to drop our meteors in. Now, to go through an example, it's DPS first. They are tethered to the east and they have to stretch a tether and drop a meteor. They are going left to right based on the pro that was discussed at the beginning of the video, and they want to stretch their tether as far as possible so that the second set of meteors have as much room to stretch their tethers. One quick thing to note about this clip is the slight mispositioning with the DPS. Notice that the Red Mage is between 2 spots rather than on his spot, which is blocking out our chocobo-headed friend. So he can't get to his spot, and instead the Red Mage should be more over to the left.
Personal space. Oh.
Yeah, you are the one that needs to be more left up.
Yeah, let him die.
There will be a little blue area around the players that are tethered, and if it flashes red, that's indicating that it's going to overlap with a meteor. If 2 meteors overlap, they explode and kill the group, so avoid that at all costs. One quirk is the second set of meteors, their blue area won't flash red for overlap with the first set of meteors until the first set of meteors actually drop. So you kind of need to eyeball a little bit where the first set are going to drop. DPS place their meteors like shown. And then TH will get tethers, and they will have to stretch their tethers in the channels behind where the first set are dropped as much as possible. This is typically where wipes will happen because the first set might not have stretched their tether far enough, so the second set you might have players that don't have enough room to safely stretch their tether far enough to avoid killing themselves. However, if you find yourself in that situation, it is always better to take the L and for you to die personally than it is to overlap a meteor and kill the entire group.
Oh, I'm dead.
Yeah. As we can see here, because the Machinist was forced out due to the Red Mage's mispositioning, their meteor is further back than it should be, which makes it so that the Scholar can't fully stretch their tether and has to sacrifice themselves.
I'll res him, it's fine.
So that's why you need to be more left, because that kills one. Next up, we have a Visceral Whirl mechanic that happens in combination with a chain mechanic. Tanks and healers are going to be chained to DPS, so we're going to have DPS run to the north safe spot for Visceral Whirl, and tanks healers run to the south. As you get to your safe spot, the acceleration bomb debuff that you got at the start of the phase will start to run out, which means as you get to your safe spot, once you've broken your chain, you want to stay still to avoid exploding. After this, there will be the usual star follow-up for Visceral Whirl, so you'll want to move to a safe spot. If possible, you'll want your healers and ranged players to move to the southern safe spot, though realistically in most PF groups everybody will move to the front safe spot because people memorize one safe spot and it's what you use for the rest of the Visceral Whirls in this fight. But ideally you want some range at the back because next up everybody's going to have their spread debuff timeout, so they're going to explode. Ideally you will want tanks at the front of the arena. Everybody else kind of YOLO. Following this, the healer stack and the fork lightnings will go off, along with dark matter tank busters on each of the tanks. So this is why we want the tanks to dodge at the front for their spread, because they will want to stay at the front to have the tank busters away from the group. The stack you will want in the middle of the arena, and then the fork lightnings just off to the side, because if the fork lightnings overlap with the stack, then the people in the stack will die. Next up, the boss will cast Black Hole on a player, marking that player with the blue marker above their head, and then cast Fractured Eventide, which will aim a laser and sweep it across the arena. You can tell where the laser is going to aim by where the boss looks, and the Black Hole player will want to place the black hole that they're going to drop right at the side of the arena. Anywhere along the side works. You'll see some groups drop it in this example on the southeast corner and just either rescue the player through the laser beam or have them run through and take a vulnerability. It is perfectly safe to have the black hole player in the corner that is safe initially, as long as they're right up against the wall. Following this, the laser beam will start rotating across the arena and players will want to chase behind it to avoid getting sucked in by the black hole. Because if you get sucked in by the black hole, you automatically die, albeit with a cool animation. So as you're following this, the black hole will finally expand to something around about this side. You can see there is a safe spot all along the side edge. Finish up this phase, we have Big Crunch. So this, much like Big Bang, involves spread AoEs and puddles on everyone. Again, try to spread towards your corner. And then a big raid wide when the cast for Big Crunch finally finishes, after which the arena will transition back to normal. After Big Crunch, the arena will turn to normal and the boss will loop similar mechanics to the beginning of the fight with Abyssal Nox and Sable Thread. After which you'll start getting a new mechanic, Sparking/Branding Flare. The way this functions is there are 2 light party towers as earlier, however they're close in the middle of the arena. So we're going to split with group 1 to the left, group 2 to the right. After taking these towers we move out as before because they're going to cleave the arena. This is what the corner prior was for. So you can see the arena is going to be split up into corners. If the cast was Sparking Flare, then this is a spread mechanic. If it is Branding Flare, it's a pair mechanic. Also worth noting, 2 players will get chaser AoEs indicated by little yellow arrows underneath their feet that follow them. What we're going to do here is have the sparking branding resolved and then the chaser people go to the corners and then move straight along the edge of the arena clockwise. If there is a chaser in the corner you're running to, you may have to wait for the first couple of explosions to go off first before you can fully move into the corner. After this first branding or sparking flare, the boss will do a void bio, tank buster, and then the other of the branding sparking flare, and then loop from the top, and he'll keep looping until you get him below 25% health, at which point he will cast Rend the Raven. This final phase has a lot of mechanically simple elements combined together in a kind of chaotic way to make a very frantic final phase, but not actually too difficult once you know what you're doing. So it's probably worth going through each of the elements one by one. First up, there will be puddles that will drop periodically near where players are standing, and these will be in combination with other mechanics going on at the same time. There is also Nostalgia, which is a multi-hitting raid wide that hits harder as it goes on. He will also periodically tether the west side of the arena, and where he tethers will dictate where a line cleave across the arena goes. So a tether in the front cleaves the front third of the arena. Tether in the middle cleaves the middle third of the arena. There will also be a mechanic Flow of the Abyss, which will have one of these cleaves going off whilst also having either a stack, in which case you move as close to the boss as possible in a group and stack. This can also be enumerations, which need exactly 2 people. This is split based on roles, so we can go to our assigned corners in our pairs and take them together. It is worth noting, in worst case scenario, if some people are dead, tanks can invuln the enumeration. So let's say the red mage is dead, the gunbreaker could super bowlide and the reaper could go join the asteroid to save them. The other pattern for Flow of the Abyss is a spread that drops behind a multi-hitting puddle, so you're spread roughly in your corners. Once the puddles drop, you move out. The last mechanic we're going to have to contend with in this final phase of the Zeromus Extreme is Cosmic Nails. This works by the boss indicating a series of claw attacks in order, whilst also tethering a side of the arena to indicate that he's going to do a horizontal cleave. And then after they're indicated, these cleaves will resolve in a manner something like this. Resolving this mechanic cleanly is massively complicated by the fact that puddles drop during it. My personal recommendation is try to hang about near the middle cone and either move into it or move out of it once puddles drop and some cleaves go off. Now with all the mechanics mapped out for the final phase, you should be able to get through it with not too many funds and get the W. So with that said, thanks for watching. Hopefully this has been useful to people. As always, I'm very open to feedback. I'm still relatively new at guide making, so any formats or tweaks or edits that people have found useful or suggestions for what could be useful are always welcome, so feel free to comment below. And until next time, see you around.